So it's perfect. Hi, Paul Watson. How are you?
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
We are so happy to have you today, and we have a lot of things to learn about your different knowledge. But to start, I would like to know where are you?
Right now, I'm in the south of France because my son has a chess tournament here, but returning to Paris on Monday.
Oh, and the weather it looks good. So I would like to start and to know about the human footprint on the oceans. And because you are often on the water, and I was wondering if you have seen any difference over the years in the human footprint on the oceans.
Well, I've certainly seen a lot of differences since in my 70 years. I was raised on a fishing village in eastern Canada. So I've seen the diminishment of fish populations, the diminishment of the fisheries, the species have gone down, species which were once common or not so common. So worldwide, all the world's fisheries are in a state of collapse because the fish populations are being so diminished. The other problems that we're seeing is changes in currents due to climate change, changes in the direction of winds because of climate change, more ice melting in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. And the most significant change, I think, also has been the accumulation of plastic debris in the ocean since 1950, which has been tremendous. I mean, literally in the billions of tons. So the differences are certainly very noticeable and are becoming more and more of a concern.
Yes, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Do you see it everywhere with the plastic? I mean, do you see it in the Atlantic? Do you see it, because I know it collects in certain places.
Well, it's there pretty much everywhere except for the Southern Ocean, and the reason there is that there's a current that's almost like a fence on the bottom of between Australia, South America, and Antarctica, and that sort of keeps things from moving south. And so that's pretty much the only place that's still free of like plastic debris, although it's certainly not untouched by chemical pollution and also fisheries that are moving in, especially the krill fishery, which goes in and takes, I think, 629,000 tons of krill. And the primary use for krill is to make it into a cheap protein paste for factory farms. So, but that's actually the food of the whales and the food of the penguins that they're literally stealing there. But plastic pollution is a global problem.
Are you optimistic about some of the new efforts to try and find ways to clean the plastic from the ocean, or do you think it's like too big of an issue to really solve immediately?
Well, let me say, for every million pieces of plastic that go into the ocean, probably about 100 pieces are retrieved. So it's certainly not making much of an impact. I mean, a lot of this is makes everything the groups doing it. It makes them look good and everything, but we just see an increasing accumulation of plastic. I mean, it comes from sources that people don't even think about. For instance, one of the major sources of microplastics in the ocean are automobile tires. Every time you drive down the
Hmm.
road, you lose tiny pieces of rubber, and that ends up being washed into the ocean. In fact, Norway has found in a study that 40% of the microplastics in the waters off Norway came from automobile tires. So there's
Wow.
so many different sources of it. One of of course, the big problem is single-use plastic, which should be eliminated, but it's insane that it isn't. But I mean, plastic can have its uses in for medical applications, industrial applications, but we shouldn't allow for single use plastic. A plastic bag here, you throw it away. A plastic cup, a straw, you throw it away. But the biggest source of plastic pollution really comes from fishing industry debris. I would say about 35% comes from the nets and lines that are discarded or lost.
Wow.
Yes, yes. I imagine. And maybe we can talk about the energy too, uh, because I would like to learn more about the offshore wind turbines
Uh,
and biodiversity, because I think that sometimes, and maybe often, humans want to do something well, but they forget about other species.
yeah.
And I
Well,
think,
we have this thing called bright green solutions that everybody sees the alternatives and they don't want to see any of the problems associated with those alternatives. I mean, electric cars, everybody thinks, oh, the electric cars are great, except where do they get the electricity? It comes from either coal fired or nuclear or oil fired generator plants. It has to come from somewhere. And also, when you look at alternative things like windmills, for instance, they're putting them offshore because people don't want them onshore. But the construction of these windmills creates incredibly high decibels, from the pile driving into the ground, like 30 meters into the ground to anchor these windmills, and that causes all kinds of problems, noise pollution. That affects and lethally affects many marine animals, including whales and dolphins. And then once you get the windmills going, they've got the cables that are running under there, which are causing problems with the movement of sea life on the bottom. They're causing problems for the migration of birds offshore. There's so many problems that are just sort of dismissed in the interest of providing a cheap alternative energy. People are coming up with some things. For instance, land-based windmills are coming up with devices that can actually shut down the windmills at the approach of birds. And but I haven't seen that on the offshore, but that is a possibility. But I don't think we should proceed with alternative energies until we've ironed out all of the problems that are associated with it. So we're not surprised because we didn't take something into account and it's had a very destructive impact. The problem is that there's 8 billion people on the planet. There was 3 billion the year I was born, so it's already gone up to 8 billion. And with every additional billion, you've got an incredible increase in the demand for energy, and that's going to use up resources, and it's just not sustainable in the long run. It just simply is not sustainable. And we have to really address the problems of climate change. And how do we do that? Uh, I said in 2015 at the COP21 in Paris that the solution to climate change is to do nothing. And what I mean by that is let's leave the ocean alone. Let's give it time to repair itself. And I would say a moratorium of 50 to 75 years to do that means shutting down all the heavy gear, mechanized, industrialized fishing operations and allowing the ocean to repair the damage we've done to it. Because the ocean is the life support system of the planet. It regulates climate and produces oxygen and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. We just need to leave it alone. But the problem is that fish populations become more diminished. We see this thing I call the economics of extinction. Heavy short-term investment for short-term gain. And what that means is giant super trawlers and 100-kilometer long lines and gill nets. I mean, you go into a fish market or a restaurant, you see, oh, there's plenty
Yes,
of
so
fish there. There's no problem. What that means is that it takes so much more energy and resources to get those fewer and fewer fish. So there's appearance of a supply, but in fact, it's very devious. I would say commercial fisheries have been 90% devastated over the years, and it's only a matter of time till they collapse permanently. But here's the problem: as the numbers go down, as the number of fish go down, the prices for those fishes go up. So it's really investment in extinction, because scarcity translates into higher profits. So and as long as people are willing to pay that money, then they will continue to take the fish. I mean, I just know I was raised in a fishing village in Eastern Canada, and I remember the prices for fish in the 1950s and 60s, and it's unbelievable how high those prices are right now. I mean, when I was a kid, you could tell the poor kids in our town. We went to school with lobster sandwiches on white bread, and we thought that was, we were trying to trade it for peanut butter on Wonder Brand. We thought that was exotic. I mean, lobsters was called the poor man's meat because there's so many of them. But now, of course, as their numbers have diminished, the value goes up, and it's an extremely lucrative industry.
yes.
Wow. So sorry. So could I ask? So I know you're an advocate for people living in smaller population settings,
Yes.
and allowing the wilderness to, being wilderness to be like in between, like settlements that people could live. I was wondering if you could maybe like tell us a little bit more about your vision for how humanity can live sustainably, like at a smaller scale, and what for, as there's still a lot of development happening across the world as populations
Yeah.
expand.
I was in Australia one time, and the question was, "What do you think the maximum population of Australia should be?" And I said about half of about 250 million Aboriginals. Together. I meant no, excuse me, I meant 25 million Aboriginals. And what that meant was that if people are living in a biocentric way, living in harmony with the environment, then that's what it's going to take to make this change. It's really not a question of numbers; it's a question of consumption of resources. And so, if you have a million people consuming X amount of resources and 20 million people using X amount of resources, but actually those 20 million could use less than that 1 million, then it's equal. I mean, when they say the world's overpopulated, for instance, India or China is overpopulated, they don't take into account that the United States is actually much more overpopulated than India because of terms of consumption. So the average American consumes 25 to 30 times the amount of resources that the average Indian does. Therefore, the population of the United States in terms of consumption is 25 to 30 times that of India. And so it's everything's not black and white. It's a very complex problem. The other thing is that what people say, well, I don't want to have children because I don't want to contribute to the population problem. The problem there is that if you're intelligent enough to know that, then you're probably the people who should have children. Because the majority of the human population doesn't even think about why they have children. It's sort of like, well, I guess it's what you do. I don't know why. I asked a fisherman in Alaska one time. I said, if no for no other reason to protect the fish for your children, you should make these changes. And his answer to me was, in 5 years my mortgage is paid, and after that I don't give a damn. So why does somebody like that have children? It's because it's what you do. you know, you don't really think about it. But if we really thought of the world we're going to lead to our children, we would in fact be taking concrete measures to ensure that they have a better future.
And do you think that it's possible to fishing sustainability?
Yeah, if you're out in a canoe off the coast of Ghana or out of the Philippines, yeah, certainly. But not with these giant mechanized trawlers and longliners. There's no such thing. For instance, toothfish fishery is a good example. The toothfish is sold as a Chilean sea bass. It's a marketing term. It's not from Chile. It's not a bass. It's from the Southern Ocean. And it's extremely expensive fish. So they go down to the Southern Ocean, catch it, put it into a freezer, haul it back to a port, put it on an airplane, fly it to Paris, fly it to London, fly it to New York, and sell it for a lot of money. That is not a sustainable fisheries. But yet, if you go into some of the markets, even some of the progressive markets, and it says sustainably caught toothfish, there's no such thing. But it all becomes a marketing thing. For instance, for years and years there was a crab up in the Bering Sea called the spider crab. Nobody wanted to eat a spider crab because, well, it sounded like they were eating a spider. So they simply changed the name to Alaska king crab, and all of a sudden everybody was buying it. So it all comes down to marketing. Back in the 70s, I remember that there was a fish called the pollock, and it was completely uncommercial because it had no taste, it had no use, and nobody bothered with it. But now it's heavily fished because they found that if you put some flavor to it, add a strip of red dye, you can sell it as artificial crab called surimi. And yet it's not crab. But if you go to Seattle to a fish restaurant, you can order crab cocktail, but it's not crab, it's surimi. It's this pollock with artificial color and flavor and smell. So they're trying to. It's get to the point they'll be fishing commercially for jellyfish at some point.
Mm.
But
So,
there's so many. For instance, the bluefin tuna, they're about 90% gone, but they're still being fished. It's the most expensive fish on the planet. Average $75,000 US dollars for one fish in Japan. Some of them sell for $1 million for one fish, and that's because their numbers have been so greatly reduced. But Mitsubishi, as one example, has probably 10 years supply of bluefin tuna in their frozen warehouses. So they could stop fishing today and continue to sell the tuna to their customers, and that would give the fish a chance to recover. But if they do that, then the fish will recover. And as the fish recover and their numbers go up, the price for the fish in the warehouses goes down. It's because scarcity translates into profits. So they're literally investing in extinction. It's the same reason in parts of Asia that they're buying elephant ivory and just putting it in vaults. They're not using it for anything. It's just an investment into the extinction of the elephant. And when the elephant's extinct, now they have a priceless commodity that's irreplaceable. And that's happening with so many species right now. And it's a major problem.
So it sounds like, I mean, there are a lot of issues we know, right? There's the economic system, there's the politics, there's the big corporations. What do you think is like the easiest path forward for change makers to approach and start to unravel some of these systems?
Well, we have to approach it from all sides. The strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. Therefore, the strength of any movement has to be in diversity. So some people can choose the path of education, litigation, legislation, or direct intervention. All of these things have to work together. So I always advise people to, what are you good at? What are your skills? What are your abilities? And harness those skills to address something that you're passionate about. And if each and every one of us did that, that would make a difference, because no one person or no one organization or no one government is going to solve this problem. It has to be solved collectively, from literally from millions and millions of people. And I really think that the problem lies in our perception of reality. Uh, about 8,000 years ago, we developed this perspective, which I call anthropocentrism. It all revolves around us. We're the most important species. It was all created for us. All these gods that we created all are created by us, for us. And, every single world religion has humans as the center of creation. And because they're all anthropocentric religions, we need a biocentric point of view, which is we're all interconnected. All this diversity is interconnected, that we have to live in harmony with all of these other species, because that's what this planet is a community of species. We don't live on a planet without worms and trees and bees and whales and fish. We simply don't. I had a reporter from the Fox network call me one time. Brett Hume was his name, and he said, I heard you say that fish and worms and trees and whales are more important than people. I said, yeah, I said that. He says, how could you say something so outrageous as to suggest that they're more important than we are? And I said, well, I said that because the fact is they're more important than we are, because they can live here without us, but we cannot live here without them. We don't live in a world without insects. We don't live in a world without phytoplankton. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton in the sea. Phytoplankton provides us with 70% of the oxygen we breathe and sequesters enormous amounts of CO2. If phytoplankton disappears from the sea, we die. In fact, most life on the planet will die because there'll be a lack of oxygen. The rainforests of Amazonia and the forests of the world provide 30%, but those phytoplankton provide 70%. And why is it being diminished? Why are the numbers going down? Because we're diminishing the numbers of whales and dolphins and seabirds and fish and all of those species that provide the nutrients for the phytoplankton, the iron, the magnesium, the nitrogen. It comes from the feces of all these animals. One blue whale dumps 30 tons of manure every day, providing an incredible nutrient base for the phytoplankton. Whales are essentially the farmers of the ocean, and their crop is phytoplankton. And that phytoplankton goes on to feed the krill, and the krill goes on to feed the fish, in addition to producing oxygen and sequestering CO2. So that's why I say the protection of the ocean is the key to addressing climate change.
Yes, totally agree.
And probably it's easier for us to avoid
Yes.
engaging with the ocean than it is to avoid engaging with the land in some sense. So,
But I also would like to provide a different view of what the ocean is. I mean, we all think of the ocean as the sea, going down to the beach and there's the ocean. The ocean's bigger than that. The ocean is the planet. This is the planet ocean. And what that means, it's water in continuous circulation. Sometimes it's in the sea, sometimes locked in ice, sometimes underground, sometimes in the atmosphere, and sometimes in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet. So the water in your body right now was recently in a plant, was recently in an animal, was recently in the sea, was recently in the clouds. It's that water continuously moving through all those mediums that makes up what the ocean. So when the question is, what is the ocean? I always say, we are the ocean. and every part of that ocean is interconnected. So what you put into the air is going to impact what's in the sea. What you put in the sea is going to impact what's in our bodies. What's in our bodies is going to impact what's in the ocean and in the atmosphere, and so on. Everything is circulating over and over again, this incredibly wonderful, absolutely necessary element called water.
Do you have another question about it?
Oh, go ahead.
I would like to know about, because often with John-Paul we speak about the difference between American and French people, about the activism and things like that. And I would like to know if you see some difference between what you see with Sea Shepherd France and here in USA.
Uh,
That can be interesting to bring here or in the other way.
well, what we had was a Sea Shepherd movement, and I actually created what I wanted to be a movement. And a movement can't be controlled. It's a movement of diversity. We had literally dozens and dozens of national entities: New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany, UK, the US, all of them working together with a very specific uh, objective, which is to approach these problems through the understanding of aggressive nonviolence, to intervene without hurting anybody or causing injury. And for 45 years, that was very effective in doing that. And we were able to intervene and shut down a lot of illegal operations, from whaling to overfishing and that. But what happened a year ago was that four men actually decided that they were going to seize control of the movement and copyright everything and control everything. And for that reason, I was ousted. Lamy Assam Lamy, the president of Sea Shepherd France, was dismissed it all unlawfully because they wanted to control it all, and you can't control it, so it's not going to work for them. But Sea Shepherd France, Brazil, and the UK remain true to that original objective. And the other groups, whether it be Germany or Italy or Australia, really gave in to what Global wanted. Because what happened is that organizations get bigger, and as they get bigger they bring in more money, and as they bring in more money, the people have jobs within those organizations. They get very comfortable in their positions, and now doing anything controversial becomes a threat to their comfort. And I was considered to be too controversial, too confrontational, and therefore a threat to their jobs, really. So people that I had actually educated, mentored, put into their positions over 20 years, they were the ones who betrayed me and then seized control of everything, seized the ships, seized the support list, seized the assets. And the most damaging thing they did was to walk away from what we were all about, this strategy of aggressive nonviolence. They wanted to become mainstream, non-controversial, and enjoy the security of their jobs, I guess. But fortunately, France, Brazil, and the UK decided not to do that. And over the last year, I reestablished the Captain Paul Watson Foundation in the US to work with France and the UK and Brazil. And we'll rebuild this movement because it has to be a movement. It can't be controlled by any one person or any group of people. It just simply can't, because a movement just doesn't work that way. And so there's a lot of things going around the world where people continue to do the same kind of thing, but they're not really part of the Sea Shepherd global movement, whatever that is. And of course, they're taking exception to this. So that reason, Sea Shepherd Global is actually suing Sea Shepherd France to demand control of the name and the logo. But that was never what we were all about. But here's the fortunate thing, is that we retained the most important aspects of what we had in that movement: the passion, the courage, and the imagination. That's what made it is. And we don't need anything else. That's all we need. So going forward, I'm quite confident that we can rebuild, that we'll be able to do campaigns in the field to protect, to oppose super tankers, oppose whaling, overfishing, the killing of dolphins. We'll continue to do that. But we're only one small part of the worldwide conservation movement. The strength of the worldwide conservation movement lies in literally hundreds of thousands of organizations and millions of individuals addressing these issues the best way they can, choosing the path of either education or litigation or legislation or direct action. This is what's going to make a difference. And anybody who says that they've got an answer to this problem uh, is just lying to you, because it just isn't. There is no one group or one person who can provide an answer to this. And we really have to look at it collectively. And I think that's happening. More and more people are becoming involved. And and I think more and more people are becoming optimistic that we can find solutions, because I've always said that the solution to an impossible problem is to find the impossible answer. And that impossible answer can be found through imagination and determination and courage and passion. And one person can change the world. I mean, look what Diane Fossey did. Because of her, we still have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. Because of David Windegate, we still have the Bermuda storm petrel in Bermuda. One person prevented a species from going extinct. I can't think of a greater achievement that anybody can do than to do that.
And it's why they can break this movement that you create, because
No.
it's more stronger than just a logo and a name. It's you, and it's why I follow you for so many time now. It's Paul Watson, and it's nothing else.
Well, they claim a copyright on the name I created and the logos I designed, but there's nothing we can do about that. You know, they use the law to their advantage. I mean, I could have done this 20, 30 years ago. I could have copyrighted it, but it wasn't my place to own it. And so we just decided not to do that. I don't want to control a movement. I want to be part of a movement.
Yeah, so it's exciting, like the point that you raise about how one person can make such a huge impact. When we think about how many of us there are in total, um, are you optimistic about the future generations? You know, these like young people who have like a different perspective than maybe our generations had.
Well,
Or
I'm not optimistic. I'm not pessimistic. I don't get depressed because back in 1973, I volunteered as a medic for the American Indian Movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. And we were surrounded by U.S. federal officers who were shooting at us, and they killed 2 and wounded 46. I went to Russell Means, who is the leader of the American Indian Movement, and I said, we don't have any hope of winning here. The odds are against us. We're completely outnumbered. We cannot win. So what are we doing here? And he looked at me and he said, well, we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're not concerned about the odds against us. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right thing to do, and the right time to do it. He said, don't worry about the future. You can't change the future, because you can't predict the future. You don't own the future, but all your power is in the present. What you do in the present, however, will define what the future is. So focus everything on the present and let everything fall where it may because of your actions. And if enough people do that, then the future will turn out better than we think it is. But there's no way I can tell you, what is this world going to be like in 2030, 2050? I have no way of knowing that. All I can say is that I'm going to do everything I can to try and make it a better world in 2030 and 2050. And everybody else should do the same thing and never ever get depressed about you know things which are beyond your control. Just focus on what you can control, and I think that'll make a difference.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know, earphones must have taken off. So okay. Anyway, never let anybody deter you, because you'll always have people saying you can't do that, you can't do this. You can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. You can change the world, and there's so many examples of that happening. I mean, look what Greta Thunberg has done. As a schoolgirl, 60 years of age, she got the world's attention. I mean, she can do that. Anybody can do it.
It's I love what you said about the future, because when we look at movie and the picture of the future, it's always without nature. It's always on the somewhere, but on the earth, and it's electric. It's matching. It's nothing nature. And sometimes I'm thinking about it, and I say maybe we need to change that too, because people can project them in a place where more nature.
Well, my prediction for the future 100 years from now, say for the year 21 23, is that it'll be more like 1823, because we're going to see a collapse of the fossil fuel industry somewhere in the next 100 years. It's going to collapse. It's just not sustainable. Even agriculture depends upon the fossil fuel industry. Everything does. Even wind power generators depend upon fossil fuel to manufacture them and to move them around, and that. So when that happens, when the collapse of the fossil fuel industry, you're going to see a complete revolution in the way things are done. So I envision the world of 21, 23 as a world of sailing ships and windmills. I mean, real windmills, and communities and return probably of horses and that. But we're going to have to adapt to that collapse of a major energy source, which is fossil fuels. And of course, they're going to try and take every ounce of oil and every piece of coal out of the ground before that happens. But it's a finite resources, and you cannot. There's limits to finite resources. The third law, there's three laws of ecology. The first is the law of diversity. The strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The second is the law of interdependence, that the species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources. There's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. And when one species steals the carrying capacity of other species, that causes diminishment in both diversity and interdependence, which leads to ecological collapse. So there probably will be a major ecological collapse sometime within the next century, and we have to be prepared to adapt to that. But we're only going to survive if we take care of all of those other citizen species that live on this planet with us. And it's that biodiversity which keeps everything moving and strong. I like to compare it to if you look at the Earth as a spaceship, which is what it is, it's on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy. And every spaceship has a life support system that provides us with everything we need: the air we breathe, the food we eat, regulates climate and temperature. And that machinery, that life support system is run, it's maintained, it's serviced by a crew of engineers that keep it all going. We humans, we're not engineers. We're passengers, but we're also, we're having a great time entertaining ourselves, but we're also killing the engineers. We're murdering the engineers, incredible numbers. And there's only so many engineers you can kill before that machinery begins to fall apart. Because without the insects, without the bacteria, without the worms and the bees and the trees and the fish, everything is going to fall apart. We don't live on a planet without them, and the sooner we realize that, the more hopeful our future will be. We have to learn to live in harmony with all of those other species and appreciate them for what they are, fellow citizens on the same planet.
No, very inspiring.
Well, we also think that we also try to tell ourselves we're the most intelligent species on the planet. I was arguing with a whaler in Norway one time. He says, "Watson, you say whales are more intelligent than people. This is a very stupid thing to say." And I said, "Well, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are." And I said, "George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. Cockroaches have been around here for hundreds of millions of years. They're doing just fine." So, what is intelligence? We gauge intelligence by hand to eye coordination, the ability to make a tool. If a blob of protoplasm stepped out of a spaceship in front of us tomorrow and it had a ray gun in its hand, we would have no hesitation. That's an intelligent species because it's got a tool and it came in a spaceship. It's an intelligent species. But what about whales and dolphins? They don't need cars. They don't need telephones. They don't need technology, but they're extremely intelligent. The average brain size of a human being is 1,700 cubic centimeters. The average brain capacity of an orca is 6,000 and a sperm whale 9,000, the largest brains to have ever evolved on the planet. And it's not brain to body size, because if that was the case, then hummingbirds would be more intelligent than we are. But the thing is that and the convolutions on the neocortex of whales and dolphins are far more pronounced than they are in humans. If anybody's ever taken Biology 101, they'll remember that they show you a rat brain, and then they have a cat brain, and then they have a monkey brain, then they have a human brain. And they'll say you can see by the increased size and the convolutions on the neocortex area, as they get more pronounced as the closer we go up to the human, that cats are more intelligent than rats, and then chimps are more intelligent than them, and we're more intelligent than chimpanzees. They never, ever put an orca brain up there. It makes us look really stupid, and we don't like to look stupid. So we just simply forget that orca brain is there.
Privileged to be able to chat with you. I guess my only question is, when, if at all, are you coming to New York? Yes.
That's really strange because I'm not really touching anything. But I said Interpol had a red notice on me, so I couldn't travel. But that's now been lifted, so I'll probably be in New York again at some point.
All right,
okay.
Great. Well, please let us know.
I will. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time,
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a
and
pleasure.
can't
Yeah.
wait to learn more about your future mission.
Oh, yeah, we're doing a campaign against super trawlers in November. Well, later this month.
Oh, great. We should definitely amplify that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a great day and enjoy the South of the France, Paul. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.